Technical Advisory Committee to orders. It is 2:31 p.m. And do the roll call for us.
Of course, Steve Rayfuse.
Here.
Steve Rebuffo, I'm not sure who he was. Katie, can I say Katie or do you want Catherine?
Kate.
Kate Duber or Brian Lindemuth? Is it a permanent replacement or just temporary still? Okay,
Temporary for now.
just want to check. Matt Stichik,
Present virtually.
Luke Boland.
Here.
Ben White.
Here.
Brad Coy.
Here.
Melinda Colhouse.
Here.
Bart Rudolph, Virginia Acton.
Yes, here.
Craig Lyon.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. So, and we also do our public involvement announcement.
Of course, AMATS committee meetings are open to the public and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. First, business items are presented by staff consultant, then the committee is given an opportunity to ask questions. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. Couple of housekeeping items. If you are joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. I will note that we are having some lawn maintenance care outside the window during this meeting, so if it's hard to hear, I apologize. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Yeah, moved by Mr. Bowen, seconded by Mr. White. Do we have any changes that are needed to the agenda? Hearing that there are no changes, are there any objections to approving the agenda? There are no objections to that. The agenda is approved. Now moving on to the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have a motion for approving the July 13th, 2023 meeting minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Ryan, seconded by Mr. Poland. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay. I don't think I heard any.
Delight on the first floor.
So hearing none, the July 13th, 2023 minutes are approved. Hopefully that was as close as they needed to get to the windows for their work outside. Moving on to agenda item 5A, the 2023 to 2026 TIP Amendment Mod number 1. Is that yours, Aaron?
Yes, it is. Okay, everyone, so we need to do a quick administrative modification to the TIP before the fiscal year ends. So what you see before you are those changes. First changes are roadway table. The first major change is 4.65 million increase for project overrun, utilities, construction, and right-of-way overrun on O'Malley Road Phase 2. So that meets our threshold in the policies and procedures where a project currently in construction, if there's increases or overruns like this, it kind of automatically goes forward. So it's being reflected in this admin mod as we are moving forward. And we are able to pay for that overrun because of the SRSA funding, where basically the SRSA funding was all used on one project for the pavement replacement program, which freed up about $6 million worth of funding. So that covers this, and we are still fiscally constrained. And then we have a couple more changes to just reflect current cost estimates and to balance the program for the East 4th Avenue signals and lighting, pavement replacement, and 3rd Avenue signals and lighting upgrade. Just note the 3rd Avenue signals and lighting upgrade change is a decrease, but that is because the SRSA funding was removed from that project in the Great Purge that happened recently. So we had some quick changes in the non-motorized table. We moved some funding for the downtown trail connection, or removed some of the funding in 23 and moved some of the funding for the Fish Creek Trail connection because they weren't going to be able to get the design approved this fiscal year, but it'll be ready in 2024 for that funding. And then there was an increase to the Anchorage Airway Pathway and Trails pavement replacement. Next, is Table 9, Transit. These changes were requested by Public Transportation Department. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bart, that 5307 split letter was signed with Public Transportation and the railroad. So this is updating the FY23 funding to reflect that split letter. All changes that are in here meet our operating agreement 6.6.2 section and policies and procedures number 5. So the recommendation is review and recommend to the policy committee approval of admin mod number 1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this item? Faith, go ahead, Melanie.
Is there an opportunity to make any changes here, or is it at this point a done deal?
Yeah, you can make changes as long as they meet the thresholds in the operating agreement. So you can't go over 50% of the total cost of the project. You can't add or delete a project, or you can't have a change in here. That is an air quality conformity determination requirement. So it depends on what change you would like to make. Plus, we'd also have to make sure that we're still fiscally constrained. So I guess it depends on what change.
I guess it's the one on Lois Drive and 32nd Avenue upgrade. I had been in communication with DOT because PM&E is proceeding to work on Lois Drive, and we're getting ready to issue CRW an amendment to continue working on Lois Drive. I don't know if there's an opportunity at this point to strike out Lois Drive and just have it identify 32nd Avenue.
No, that has to be done as an amendment because it is a scope change for that project, as well as like a termini change for that
Okay.
project, which falls under the threshold of amendment. So that will be captured as part of amendment 2. I already have that ready to go.
Okay. Steve?
Just a comment and a question. Just want to voice support and appreciation that there's extra funds going into the area-wide pathway trails pavement replacement. Are projects already determined, or that just bolster existing projects, that additional funding?
Yeah, so on table 6 under the pavement replacement, can you go to the tables there, scroll down to table 6, please? It's on page 8. There you go. So this list right here, the second table on the right, or the table on the right, is the list of projects that's covered under the pathway and trail pavement replacement program. So that's already established. However, as funding comes in and those projects are completed, it opens up space for future projects to be added. I believe as part of Amendment 2, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll be looking at possibly adding some more projects to both the roadway and pathway pavement replacement program. So there's an opportunity for discussion at that point of, if you have a recommendation, please send it to me and we can reach out to the MUNI and DOT maintenance teams as well and kind of confirm with them.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any comments from the public? Anybody in the room with comments? Anybody online? Comments?
Nothing online.
Online, okay. What is the will of the committee?
I'll move to recommend approval to the policy committee. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Rudolph, second by Mr. Lyon. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. We are on to 5B, which is the AMATS planning funds distribution formula update. Is that yours, Karen, as well?
All of them will be me today, so I'm on the hot seat. There you go. So yeah, keep myself going.
Good.
So I don't have any issues again. Okay, so before you is the PL distribution formula for the UPWP. So just as a reminder, the UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program. It is one of our required documents that we have to have as an MPO, and it describes staff to what tasks staff will be charging their time to, what projects are going to be funded out of the UPWP. So, one of the things that has to happen or can happen realistically is a formula for how the PL funds are distributed. So basically they come to the state as kind of a lump sum, and then the state distributes it out to the MPOs that are available in the state. So right now it's AMATS and FAST, but MVP is coming online. So they're going to be the new third MPO, which is why this formula is being updated, because it needs to be retooled to account for the third MPO that's coming online. As part of that distribution, the state has the opportunity to develop a formula, if they so choose, that says how they're going to be distributing those funds that take into account, population, traffic, air quality, and a whole host of other things. Kind of lay out some of that information in the memo for you. So the previous formula was developed in 2014 and distributed 80% of the funding towards the existing MPOs, and the state kept 20% for discretionary use on non-MPO related tasks or for areas that are not part of the MPOs. And so it was based, that portion distributed to the MPOs was based on population status of planning, air quality, and population growth factors. So AMATS was getting 77.42% of the UPW funding that was going towards MPOs, and FAST was getting 22.58%. So in updating this formula, DOT program development organized a meeting with the MPOs and invited myself and Jackson Fox, who's the executive director of FAST, as well as the MVP folks to come and attend a meeting and discuss the update of this formula. During the discussion, everyone kind of brought their points. Why, what should we update it to? How should we update it? How is the distribution happening? Finally settled on distribution based on the urban area populations of each MPO. So the urban area populations are those that are set as part of the census every 10 years. So basically, it's not our entire MPO boundary, but our urbanized area that helps determine that we're an MPO, and then what level of MPO we are, because we're above 200,000, so we're a TMA and have more requirements. The reason urban area was selected versus MPO population, the MPO boundary is determined by the MPO. So if, for example, a growing MPO wanted to game the system to say, we have more population, and grow, they can have their MPO cover their entire area. It'd be like, yeah, we anticipate this growing over the next 20 years. To eliminate any of that jockeying for the funding, it was determined the most fair and equitable would be using the urban area population set by the census and then updated every 5 years by the American Community Survey. So everyone in the room agreed to it and said that's fair and equitable as long as we used the census and the ACS, and then updated every 5 years, especially because Matsu is growing so rapidly. In 5 years, their population percentage could be vastly different than what it is up there that you see on the screen. So what this means for AMATS is we have 66.63% of the urban area population, which means we would get 66.63% of the funding. And then FAST would get 19.09 and Matsu would get 14.29. I did include in the formula distribution, a quick sheet that kind of shows the funding and what that looks like. That'll be the next action item. Yeah, that one, if you want to scroll to the bottom. And it kind of breaks out how the formula, keep going. What the formula will look like. So there's a lot of maths here. Basically what it turns, kind of comes total with, AMATS is going to be held harmless in this change. So we will not be seeing a reduction in our funding. If anything, we have a tiny increase of funding just because of how all the formula works out. Included in this is also the 5303 funding that comes to AMATS for transit planning.
I'm sorry.
That transit planning is all done by Public Transportation Department, so all that funding is given to them for them to do their efforts. So the same formula is being used to distribute the, hold on a second.
Not asking for it, but.
Yeah, we'll just move it. The same formula that's going to be used for the PL funding will also be used for the 5303 funding. and distributed out as you see in the table before you. So the state did work with us as AMATS and also the Public Transportation Department. We had a meeting on this to determine if this formula was appropriate or not. So before you today is all this information in the formula. I know it's a lot, but it's really positive that the state invited us to attend this meeting and hear our voices be heard. So I really appreciate that. One other thing I want to call your attention to is Part B of this document, that is the use of unobligated PL funds. So every UPWP cycle, if there's any funding that is not used, it's unobligated. So it goes back to the state, back to the general pot of funding. And there was never a process by what happened to that funding after it went back to the state? Who used it? What did it go towards? So the state and the MPOs worked on the Part B that you see here, which is the use of unobligated funds. Basically, PL funds deobligated will be made available to the MPO at a future date. So if we had like 100,000 left over at the end of our UPWP cycle, that 100,000 would be made available to us for the next UPWP cycle if we wanted to use it for something. It's really awesome that the state is willing to do this because they're not required to make this available to us once it's deobligated. And another thing that will come up is if those funds continue to be unneeded, say that, the next UPWP cycle, we didn't need that 100,000. The other MPOs would have the opportunity to submit an application, more or less, of how they could use those funds. And then the MPOs and the state would get together and discuss, is that an appropriate use for the funds, and say yay or nay. It's a really positive way to work on a cooperative environment between the MPOs and the state, and to help other MPOs. Say Matsu needs some money because they're getting started. Well, there's a bunch of extra funding sitting there, so why don't we make that available to them so they can get themselves going, because they have a lot of work to do. Or if FAST needs a little extra work because of their air quality issues. So it gives us the ability and them to be flexible with that unused funding. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop there. And the recommendation is to recommend to the policy committee to support this updated PL distribution formula. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Your coffee and snack are doing you good. It's a really good explanation.
I think I'm going a little
felt like I
quick.
could actually follow all the logic and it seemed very fair, and
Thank you.
I liked how it was explained about the urbanized areas. That made a lot of sense. So
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? One that I have, so the planning funds, are those like studies and things of that nature, or is it more staff funding?
We use it for staff funding primarily. It can be used for planning or for studies and other things. The limitation we have with the PL funds, they have to be used within that. Projects, especially construction projects, can take longer than those 2 years. So you don't want to start a project or a study and then be like, okay, well, you're done. Now find more funding in the next UPWP cycle. So we try and limit using it for studies, but it can be if there's a desire.
Okay. And then the one other thing that I was wondering, so you said 80% of the state funding previously went to MPOs. Am I reading it right that now 90% looks like is going towards them because of the addition of MVP?
So it's kind of weird how it works, and I'm gonna try and explain this, but if I get it wrong, please somebody from the state correct me. What typically happens is you're not able to obligate the full 100% of federal funds. There's an obligation, 90% of it, and 10% of it has to be unobligated and then can be used at a later date. It's I think like a budget to anybody. So this is not unique to us. The 80% was of that 90%, and 20% would go to the state, or they would hold on to that. What's happened now is the full 90% is being distributed to the MPOs. None is being left for the state because they have other funds that they're using. But there's still that 90-10, that obligation limit. But as they say in here, that 10% can be used at a later date once that process is done. Because I think it's during August redistribution that 10% is allowed to be redistributed out and used for.
It's very late in the fiscal year.
It's a strange process that the feds have, or the Congress put on that, but it's what it is.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Do we have any additional questions from the committee? Okay, let's go to the public. Are there any comments from the public? Any comments online?
No.
Let's see comments in the room. Okay, moving then to the question of the committee's will on this item. What is the will of the committee?
I move to, forward it to the policy committee for approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Colhass, seconded by Mr. Lyon to forward this recommended PL distribution formula to the policy committee for approval. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing and seeing none, the motion is approved. Next item that we have then is 5C, the 2024 to 2027 STIP comments. Go for it, Aaron.
Okay, so this should be a fun topic. So as everybody knows, DOT has recently put out their STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program for 2024 through 2027. So just as a big picture, this is a larger version of the TIP. So the TIP covers AMATS, the STIP covers Alaska. And the TIP does have to be incorporated into the STIP, so there is a nice synergy between the two. So the STIP is out for comments, and staff, AMATS staff, including myself, were reviewing the STIP and noticed some areas of concern. And so with their input in mind, this letter was put together to bring forward to the committees, Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Committee, for review and possible approval to submit these comments to the state on the STIP. This is really one of the first times I've ever had to do this, so it's kind of new territory for me. So if there's some pitfalls along the way, I apologize, but I couldn't sit by and just let this go without commenting because of these concerns. So let me just go through a couple, and I know there may be an editor to them. First, I really do want to thank DOT program development for a couple of things. One, they've been really responsive when I've had questions regarding the STIP and concerns over things. They've really reached out and answered my questions when I sent it to them. So I do appreciate that because I know right now it probably isn't easy for them dealing with this STIP and the state it is. I do also really appreciate that the state is moving towards more interactive information. I think it's a huge step forward for the STIP, and I think it's a really positive step, and encourage that to continue more often. Now, to get into some major comments. So the first is that metropolitan areas are supposed to be coordinated with on the development of the STIP. That didn't happen. The STIP just came out for a 45-day public comment period. There was no outreach effort by the state to talk about what's in the STIP, to have AMATS review the draft, or to get any kind of feedback. When AMATS develops the TIP, there is heavy coordination between the state and AMATS. The state is involved in the nomination process, the project scoring process, the criteria development, the development of the TIP itself, and then the final approval of the TIP. So it is very aggravating to see the STIP come out with no consideration given to AMATS to provide any feedback. Because I can tell you, if they had bothered to spend at least 5 minutes talking with us, a lot of these errors that you see before you could have been corrected. So I strongly hope that the state is thinking about this for future STIP development, and this is not a new trend that we are going to see for future documents. Because I know program development has been busting their butt to work with AMATS and coordinate on everything. So to see this come out in this shape, It calls into question, was this even developed by program development? Or was this developed internally by just a few people at DOT? And that leads into my second point. There doesn't seem to be any information about scoring of projects, criteria used, or what that process is. And I do understand that there's a lot of carryover projects from the 2020 through 2023 STIP. So I'm not talking about those. I'm talking a lot about the new projects in here. And they don't necessarily have to be within the AMATS area. They can be anywhere in the state. Because if you're going to be spending money on those projects, that's less available for us here in the Anchorage area. And I just went through the Strategic Highway Safety Plan update, where everyone just said constantly that Anchorage has a safety problem. And so when I sit here and I look at the projects and they're focused on the safer Seward Highway, and that's it. Where's the non-motorized safety projects? So I look at to try and find where the scores are, there's nothing. And then I look at the 2020 through 2023 STIP and I can't find any scores either. You know, AMATS is held to a pretty rigorous standard by FHWA on the development of our TIP. So I would really like to see the state held to the same standard and to have a process for how projects are selected. I can't defend the state anymore on these projects. So it calls into question, how are projects added to the TIP that the state wants in there? If the state's not going to do their responsibility to have a process in place, then I think AMATS needs to step up and start scoring any project, regardless of who it's for, minus discretionary grants and some other things, should be subject to our criteria. And then it's up to the policy committee whether or not they want to include them based on those scores. So just a heads up, that'll probably be something I'll be discussing with the policy committee at the meeting in a couple of weeks. Because AMATS is held accountable for every project in the STIP or in the TIP. And I have so much rage right now. I got to be careful. I know I have this here and I'm just. Okay, next, real quick. There's really no good information put into the STIP document about the transportation performance measures. You know, there's a small little discussion about it, but it really doesn't do justice. AMATS is supposed to require a kind of like system performance report basically for the TIP that talks about how the projects are helping to meet the performance measures. There's like a paragraph, half a page in the STIP narrative for 200 plus projects. So AMATS recently received a certification review corrective action for this TIP. So I'd love to work with the state on developing this for both the STIP and the TIP, so it can be kind of in sync and in line, because there's not a lot of information about what this should look like for the TIP. So please reach out. I would love to partner on it. Number 4, there are significant concerns I have about the total project costs in the STIP and fiscal constraint. I cannot in any way determine if the STIP is fiscally constrained. There are no tables that show the overall total revenue coming in and the total project costs. Then when you start going to the deep dive, project costs totals don't match with the individual that they put out there, because there's 3 tables in each deep dive that show the total funding, then the total funding by phase, then the total overall estimate. The project I list here, Sterling Highway 45 to 60, is listed at 330 million for the total estimate. But when you add up the funding, it's 431 million. The Seward Highway 98.5 to 110 project, the Safer Seward Highway project, is 515 million total cost, but when you add everything up, it's like 665 million. These are not small differences that exist. We again rely on the state to tell us that they are fiscally constrained when we put projects in our TIP. We are using what they give us, and it puts us on the hook to say that things are fiscally constrained. So I'm a little concerned about that. Last major concern, for some reason, the AMATS allocation for CTP and TAP are not correct in the 24 through 27 STIP. They are much higher than they were in the 23 STIP. So I already did reach out to program development about that, received an explanation on the issue, but we asked that please be corrected in the STIP so we can know what the accurate amount is that we have to program each year. The STB or the CTP one is like almost $5 million difference. That's huge for us. So, yeah. And then the rest are technical comments. You can read through those. I didn't want to spend too much more time on it. But the last technical thing, or the one technical, it feels like the STIP website and document were not complete before they were put out. Changes were being made on the fly while I was trying to get the comments ready. There are new things being added, and it caused a lot of confusion, especially around the comment period timing. I was just at a meeting with the assembly on their rules committee talking about the STIP, and they're like, well, when is the comment period? It's confusing. I'm like, the STIP document says the 29th of September, but the website says the 3rd. So that kind of stuff really impacts people's ability to comment on the STIP document. You know, we tried our best to get the information out to everyone. The STIP is available. So I'm happy to help with that, but I can't sit by and let this go. So thank you. Sorry, the ask is to review the comments in this letter and to then make a recommendation, hopefully support of them to the policy committee. One last thing, I know, and then I'll be done. I didn't really put project-specific information in here about whether a project should be moving forward or not. I thought that was too in the realm of policy, and I didn't feel comfortable saying, why is this project moving versus this one? I had no technical basis to make that determination because none of that information is available. So you'll notice that everything in here is technical in nature about process. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Thank you for being passionate and interested in all of this. This is really insightful and helpful. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
No comments. I appreciate the effort here. It's a lot of stuff to look over. You know, doing AMATS for a long time, the main focus that I've always had hammered home to me by the feds was a public process. Because this is, after all, taxpayer funds. These are not the feds' money. This is not the state money. It's not AMATS's money. These are taxpayer funds, and we are using their funds to do improvements that we think through our efforts are the right improvements. But we go out to the public all the time to make sure that we're getting those sounding boards. Do we do it absolutely perfectly? Of course we don't. And there's always room for improvement. But as Aaron said, there's no criteria here that shows how did they score one project over another. There are no scoring sheets that showed who scored what, or even what the scores were. We have no way of knowing how they picked projects out of thin air. When TAP funding was added under, I believe it was safety, the transportation alternative programs, the Fed said, you have to have a competitive process to do this. They did not dictate what criteria you have to use, how many criteria you have to use, any of that sort of stuff. They just said, you have to have a competitive process. A black box is not a competitive process. If you just show, here's the projects that we're going to do, how does anyone know how did one project score higher than the other? Not this tip, but the tip before that, when we ranked and scored projects, we had Northern Access to UMed, the road to the university. I think it was the second highest scored project. Now, as you remember, that was met with universal acclaim. Everyone thought that was wonderful. Actually, most people hated it. But the reality is, when you score that project using the criteria that AMATS approved, and the process that we went through to approve it was a very public process saying, here are the criteria that we use. What do you think of that? And they come back in. Then we do the ranking and scoring. Here's how the project laid out. We had so many people come out and say, why is that project scoring so high? And we had to say, well, for example, improves non-motorized facilities gets you this amount of points. If you put that road in and you have a sidewalk on one side and the separated pathway on the other, that improves non-motorized facilities. You may not like the project, but it gets points for doing that. So in other words, a very public process that we went through that was very transparent and showed everyone what it was, the technical merits of that project where it could score at a certain amount. Very public about it. We didn't try to hide anything. We didn't try to, just throw it in the last minute. And of course, as everyone knows, the policy committee decided they did not want to fund that project and they removed it. So, but the process was extremely transparent. This process, as far as I can tell, is the opposite of it. So I really appreciate your comments on this. Very, very thorough, and very good job.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyon. Any other questions or comments from me? Go ahead, Luke.
I'd just like to say thanks to staff for all the work that they've put into this. Also like to thank the folks that have taken the time to comment on both the website. There's multiple ways for folks to put their input in, and I hope people continue to do that. We had a public meeting here last night here in Anchorage. Understand not that well attended, but hopefully people are taking advantage of the virtual options that are out there. We do have a virtual meeting that was held last weekend, I want to say, and the recording of that is up on the website for folks to take a look at. And so, like Craig says, these are public dollars, and so I hope people are providing input on where they think those public dollars should be going. I did have one just minor change. If you go to page 3 of the document under the technical comments, item 4 talks about the Glen Highway and milepost 0 to 33 rehab, and that it's listed as an Anchorage/Matsu project. While it's only in the Matsu area, that project actually does go from Airport Heights all the way out to the Parks Highway, so that does fit underneath both Anchorage and the Matsu. But there are a number of projects within the STIP that do call out either Anchorage or call out Anchorage and Matsu that are in one or the other. So I don't know the best way to, if we wanted to swap a project there or just say that there are multiple projects that should be listed as one or the other or both, but double check that. So.
Yeah, yes, there is an error. And, I apologize, there was a lot to go through, but we can either add another project, the Seward Highway Diamond to O'Malley is also listed Anchorage/Matsu for the borough. And so it might be better just maybe say, please check the borough locations and correctly identify them for the Anchorage projects, because there's no municipality of Anchorage borough, it's Anchorage Matsu borough. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So we can just change it to be more generic if you would like.
I have a question on that. Is it valuable to, some of these, like this one that goes across multiple boroughs, or it's Matsu borough and municipality of Anchorage, I guess, multiple jurisdictions, as I was reading through some of the comments, it seemed like separating out what was in Anchorage versus what was in Matsu and other places was helpful to do. So how do you do that with a project like this that does span the two?
I think with this one, it's appropriate with the Glen Highway 0 to 33. But other ones, I think we need to do something out there.
Okay, so
I think it's a good comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a minor correction.
And I think it's really easy to do. So when you go through and want to search for all the projects in the municipality of Anchorage, it's a little difficult now, especially since one of them, as I said, is listed in Kenai. So, you kind of might miss that when you're initial through, but if leaving it as Anchorage Matsu, I think it's fine to denote that it's in both locations. And then when you do searches, which I love the tables, by the way, because you could put in that like borough is municipality of Anchorage and borough is Anchorage/Matsu. So then you can go through and kind of see all the projects. And then as long as because I think there's a location field as well that says Anchorage to Matsu. So as long as those are correctly identified, you can see which ones are Anchorage, which ones are Matsu, and you should be okay.
And if this one is in both, what does it say in the location field?
I think it says both Anchorage, Matsu. So there's effort.
If you're filtering by location, you can choose Anchorage, you can choose Matsu as separate, or you can choose like a combined.
Yeah, you can do all three if you want to see everything in there. That's what's kind of nice about the air tables, is it gives you that ability to filter by kind of how you want it, a lot more nuanced than it has been in the past.
So would the appropriate thing, if we want to approve this for being, provider support to this being forwarded to the policy committee, would it be to do an amendment to this technical comment 4? And would that be to rework the wording of that, or what's the best path forward for that item?
We propose maybe several, amend the first sentence to say several projects within the STIP are listed as Anchorage/Matsu, while only in Matsu or Anchorage area.
Okay, that sounds good. Do we need to repeat that? You have,
We're not making a motion yet. We still gotta do public comments.
all right, that's a good point. Okay. I guess I could have myself, so hold on to that.
Write it down. Maybe I could come up with something a little bit better.
I think what you came up with is great, but if, that sounds great. Thanks for sharing that.
I do have a question timeline wise. So the timeline would be, we'd make a recommendation to the policy committee. The policy committee meets in a week or two.
20 weeks.
Okay, and then from that point, then you would send the letter, assuming the policy committee, but we're looking at a pretty tight turnaround of either the 3rd or the 28th or 29th, whichever date that actually is that it closes.
The 3rd.
Is there, so should we be making an ask to extend the period so that they can actually address some of the things that we're pointing out? And thus, allowing them to make some of these changes they might not realize?
I don't know. Because typically what happens is you do the public comment period, then you gather all the comments, then you make all the changes that you want from the comments. So you don't necessarily have to extend the comment period. Unless, you feel that the current comment period is not long enough, then we can add that in.
Well, I'll just state for the record. You're calling out a lot of good things. You're identifying a lot of good things. And I don't know if it would be beneficial to point them out and give DOT a chance to maybe make some of the corrections, clarify information, and then allow for a longer review period. Rather than, it seems like we're just going to spend a couple of weeks making the recommendations. The policy committee will give the okay. We'll send it, but it will simply just be comments get filed into the record, perhaps without any time for meaningful redress.
It seems like having their comment period closed sooner gives them more time to actually address them, because then it closes the comment period and they can start actively addressing them. So at least that's what I would assume from the way that I've seen the process work. So I would think that we'd want to extend the comment period, because then that just delays when they can actually start making the changes.
So I'll mention one thing real quick that I forgot, but I probably should. So the STIP is required to be approved by October 1st of this year, when the new fiscal year starts. If the STIP is not approved, then AMATS is penalized. We are not able to move forward on any new projects, any new phases of projects, period. And we can't make changes to the TIP, like the amendment that I have scheduled for September, which may not happen now, where we have to add in the CMP, the congestion management process plan, to update that per DOT or FHWA's request, or any of the changes that projects need in 24 to keep them moving forward if there are cost increases. So, that's one of the things I've been wrestling with, because, calling out these errors, I don't see how the STIP can be approved on time with these errors. So it's a huge problem. Extending the comment period, I don't know if that'll matter too much or not.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, perhaps there was criteria they're following. It's just not out there for us to see, or for folks who might be commenting to see. And so I'm just wondering if bringing this to the attention of DOT allows for bringing some more of that transparency before the comment period closes. And I think the point of the STIP is done in October, and the timeline we're working with, it makes total sense not to extend that comment period.
Yeah, typically nobody does that, kind of respond to comments in the middle of a comment period. They wait until the comment period's closed to respond to them, because then you compiled all of them and responded to them in one go instead of the incremental chunks. I do anticipate some kind of response from DOT if this letter goes forward. I don't know what that'll be, but we'll probably get some kind of response out of it.
So let's say that, DOT gets this and says, okay, we're going to incorporate all of these, path forward, I mean, if it's not approved by October, then that limits some funding like you mentioned. Is there an option to say, okay, we're gonna at least keep it as approved and we're gonna be working on an amendment?
It's not really up to us about the STIP, because it's DOT's and then FHWA approves it. So it's really up to FHWA to determine what happens with the STIP. What we have the opportunity to do is provide comments to them and say, this is what we see. And then give the comments to DOT and then rely on them to respond to them. And FHWA has already seen these comments, so they're aware of these concerns. And as you see, FHWA is listed as a CC on here. So in my mind, they're not disappearing in a black hole somewhere and we'll never see them again.
So we're making a decision right now whether we forward to the policy committee and they can decide whether to forward them to the state as comments. And then if the state takes them, they've got the choice of how to incorporate them, how to address them with this October dated line. Ideally, they would try to incorporate them, try to address them. And if they didn't, as we come around to our tip, I mean, I guess we would go forward a little bit differently with how we slot in STIP projects into our tip. Is that?
If they didn't approve it by October 1st, then we basically are on hold with the TIP until this TIP is approved. There's also some other concerns that there are projects in the STIP that aren't in the AMATS MTP. Technically, they can't happen. They're supposed to be in the MTP before they're included in the TIP or the STIP. So if we have to do like an MTP amendment before the STIP can be approved with those projects in it, that's a 6 to 8 month process alone. So there's a lot of kind of working parts. That's why typically coordination happens with the MPOs before you put out a STIP, so you can identify those areas and get them addressed.
Yeah, there's lots of different moving parts.
Mhm.
Does this comment on the MTP piece?
No.
Okay. That's, I can also see that being kind of a major challenge if.
Yeah, it didn't really come up until after this was posted, but we can add an item in there for 6 that says there are projects in the STIP that are not in the AMATS MTP, not consistent with the AMATS MTP right now. An amendment would be needed to make that consistency happen prior to those projects being included in the TIP or the STIP. A good example is the Seward Highway 98.5 to 110, or the safer Seward Highway that is not in the MTP in the fiscally constrained portion.
Thoughts from the committee on that item? I guess we're not defining the motions yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is out for the public because they can access this letter, this draft letter. It'll, we've got folks that are committee members from DOT. So what they do with it is, not in our control, but it gives them an opportunity to know what type of comments are out there. I think a lot of cleanup could happen, especially math has to add up, some vetting, maybe some revisiting on tables and sorting. So it gives them some chance to get busy and do some cleanup. So what they come up with and trying to meet the deadline for getting the final submitted before October 1st, I think is an important milestone so that everything falls into place that is important to all of the working items, including the tip schedule, etc. I think the thing that's good about this is it sends a clear message of, hey, transparency is important, safety projects are important, public involvement is important. So the message has been identified. I think that's the great thing. So moving forward, they can be aware with this project, the program development group, to be concerned and be mindful of all these things that have to be included for a fully justified document. So that AMATS can feel confident that this is you know, this is the best represented, item, and it shows where the fiscally constrained, you know, that everything has been looked at thoroughly. So I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if it'll fully get there by October 1st, but I'm gonna be an optimist and say, let's see what they can do. Hopefully they see what, is before them, and then maybe future going forward, we'll get a better product. And then have more coordination. I think that's the thing that I've always, appreciative is anytime I call anybody from AMATS, I've got a question, you guys are very responsive. So I think the coordination piece, it's there. Pick up a phone. Thank you.
Hey, Aaron, this is Matt Stitchick. It sounds like that issue of projects in the STIP that are not in the MTP is highly consequential, since that would not allow the STIP to be approved. Can we make a recommendation to the state, to DOT, that they pull those projects back out of the STIP and resubmit them as an amendment? Otherwise, it sounds like both the STIP and the TIP get delayed for at least 6 months.
Technically speaking, you guys can recommend anything. So, sure, if that's what you want to recommend, because the process is so strange. Let me try and go through this. So we have a STIP project. It has to be in the TIP and it has to be in the MTP before it can be in the TIP. It has to be in the TIP before it can be in the STIP.
Right.
So it's very weird. How the process works seems strange, but it's logical when you think about it, because then you're basically saying, yeah, the NPO agrees with this project on their long range plan. They agree with it in their plan. So when they go forward, the STIP approval, it's in there.
I guess what I'm asking is there a way we can head off an obvious 6-month delay by triggering that problem, or by avoiding that issue?
Yeah.
in this iteration of the STIP?
You could, at least from the AMATS end. I don't know if FAST has any similar projects, but from our end, you could make the recommendation that any project not in the 2040 MTP that is shown in the STIP be pulled and then added in later via amendment once it's in the MTP.
Yeah, I would recommend that as part of our motion.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Bert.
I appreciate the letter, and I think I'm grateful to Aaron and the AMATS staff who really took the time to go over this for us. The STIP is very confusing sometimes. And I think what we see here at AMATS is people from the public come here upset with the DOT project because they see it in the TIP and they want it removed or changed, and they don't understand that the STIP is the process that they need to be involved in to amend a DOT project. And we are constantly having that conversation here at the TAC and the PC level. And I think that reflects the lack of coordination between DOT and AMATS. A lot of times we will get a statement during committee comments from a DOT representative that says, oh, hey, this TIP is out for review and comment. And that is it. There's no presentation, there's no review of projects, there's no discussion as to how those projects were included in the STIP. So I hope that this letter, and I think it's a great letter, sparks more conversation between DOT and AMATS and gets them to involve AMATS and the people that come to AMATS meetings more. And, maybe they will get better turnout for their meetings or more comments from the public, because it is terribly confusing for members of the public to understand the TIP and the STIP and everything funding related for transportation. And the easier we make that, I think the better, because I feel bad for people that come here upset with DOT projects because there's nothing AMATS can do. We can't change them. We can't change the funding. We can vote to take it out of the TIP, but that probably is never going to happen. That would have huge ramifications. So I think this is a good step to kind of get that conversation moving. So I really appreciate it. And I agree with Matt. I think our comment involving the projects that are not in the MTP, I think that we should say they should be removed rather than amended because we don't have that time to do the amendment process. So that's all. Thank you.
And thank you, Bart. Any other questions or comments? I think I do want to say that I really appreciate that it does feel like the state has been doing a lot of outreach. Or it was very open. It seems like this is more outreach than maybe I've seen before. I mean, it's tough because it seems like you're doing the outreach and then all these potential issues like getting hammered for it from it. But I think it's still very valuable and I would say not to shy away from the public outreach because of some of this, but instead being able to continue to move forward. And I just want to express my appreciation for that willingness and openness.
No, and
Exposure.
I think for us officially, the planning program development, we appreciate the relationship with AMATS. And I think, both James and staff and Aaron and his staff, we've been working really hard to get good coordination going on between planning program development and our MPOs. And so one of the things that, Aaron and I've talked about is to make sure that we maintain that strong relationship, the coordination and working through this. So I know there's a lot of strain, but I think we've been working really hard to maintain this relationship and working on our coordination. And we do value the comments and we look forward to trying to resolve these things.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Any other committee comments or questions? Okay, how about the public? Are there any comments from the public? I don't see any in the room.
Nothing
Looks like there's nothing online. Okay, so now we're moving into the motion period. We'll start by main motion and then amendments will come after that. What is the will of the committee?
Move to recommend to the policy committee that we send the letter that Aaron has drafted.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Rudolph, second by Mr. Lyon. Okay, so now with this motion before us, we've had a few discussion items on some potential amendments. Does anyone want to put forward any amendments?
This is Matt Stichik. I'd like to recommend an amendment or a recommendation, a modification to the letter, including item number 6 regarding the projects in the STIP that are not in the MTP being an issue that should be resolved by removing those projects and adding them in as an amendment to the STIP.
Okay, so I understand you're making a motion that an item 6 under the major comments section of the letter be added that addresses that MTP and consistency. To what degree does that motion, Aaron, need to be specific language? Is it okay if there's a motion to add it, and we'll leave it up to you to?
Yeah, probably what I'll do is I will list what the projects are that I see now to give an idea of what they are. And then I can put in there that recommend that these projects in the 2024-2027 STIP are not reflected in the 2040 MTP and should be removed and can be added at a later date via amendment, and if and when they're added to the 2040 MTP via amendment. I don't know, I gotta flesh out the language a little, it's a little awkward, but something like that.
I'll second Mr. Stichik's motion.
Okay, is what Aaron explained, Matt, is that what your motion is?
Yes, absolutely. I'll let Aaron work on the crafting of that paragraph, but yes, he's addressing that issue exactly.
What I can do is craft it, send it to you all, and then see if you have any changes, any red flags that it's not correct, and then go from there.
Have a confirmation that it's consistent with the motion. I mean, Or voting no. Okay, any discussion item on this motion? Is that what I do next? We can let the members before we vote, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, it's just if there's any comments or questions and then we vote. You don't have to do public comment because you closed the public comment, so you're just now at the committee.
Okay. Any committee comments or questions on that motion? Okay, should we do a roll call on it or see if there are any objections?
Through the chair, if there are any objections, then do a roll call otherwise.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, seeing none, that amendment is approved. Okay, any other amendments here? Go ahead, Lou.
Move to amend technical comment number 4 to replace the first sentence to say several projects in the STIP are listed as Anchorage/Matsu while they are only in the Anchorage or Matsu area. Second sentence.
Okay, moved by Mr. Poland. You have a
Second.
second on that?
Matt Stichik, second.
Okay, are there any discussion on that? Okay, any objections to approving that motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion, that amendment is also approved. Do we have any other amendments on this letter? Okay, looks like we're then back onto the main motion. Are there any objections to the main motion? As amended. As amended. Okay, hearing no objections, the motion is approved. Okay, thanks everyone for all of your work on that, and thank you again, Aaron, for putting this forward, and thank you, Ben, and your team of DOT for being amenable to some of this. I know it can be a little bit painful, but definitely appreciate it, for sure.
Thank you.
Moving on then to item 6 in the agenda, we have project and plan updates. The first one is 6A, the 2023 to 2026 TIP Quarter 3 obligation report. And we'll go ahead, Aaron.
Sounds good. Okay, everyone. So it's a familiar sheet, letting you know where we're at with obligation of the TIP. We are in third quarter and required to be plus or minus 5%. You scroll on down to the bottom real quick. You will see that we are actually 7.43% over, about 2.8 million. So this basically means we're over programmed or over obligated by 2.8 million. I do want to reflect the reason we are over obligated at this point, or anticipated to be over obligated, is because of the SRSA funding change. So that caused us some pretty significant issues getting the program balanced. The TIP admin mod that you just recommended for approval balances the program. So it's a little backwards how we're doing this, but it is what it is. You'll see that there are SRSA funds in this obligation report, so you can kind of see where some of them went. Others had to be removed. It just happened in weird times between third and fourth quarter. So our hope is by fourth quarter, we will be at 0, but James like, don't look at me, but we'll see how it goes. I just want to really thank DOT's efforts, as well as especially Steve Rayfuse and the assembly. They've been doing a lot of work last minute to get our funds obligated. You know, really, really good news. The assembly did approve the match for the Campbell Creek overcrossing at Lake Otis. So I saw the match check today, and I was like, ooh, money. So very excited. I know that the assembly, you know, very grateful for their efforts to get it approved. They're very excited for this project. I think the whole community is very excited for that project. So, you know, it's a lot of last minute work. So really appreciate everyone's effort on that to get us there. So it's just kind of a run through of where we're at. And you can see by and large, we are where we should be for third quarter, minus some changes we made with the admin mod. So you'll notice that this doesn't reflect the admin mod since it hasn't been approved. It only reflects amendment number 1. So, that's all I had. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee? So I guess the question that I have is, when does this order 3, does it get shared with anybody? Will it get shared before or after modification that we just forwarded to the policy committee?
Will it be shared to the policy committee after they approve admin mod number 1? But it's part of this kind of just shows the justification for why we have to do admin mod number 1. And we also do provide this information online. It's posted on our TIP website where we post the quarterly reports for the public to be able to see.
And this one, as is going to be posted. Will it have an explanation of how it's corrected?
No,
But if they have questions, then we'll.
then they can reach out to us and we can explain it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. The next item that we have is item 6B, the project status report.
I don't have too much to say. This is just third quarter update for the project status. So, peruse at your leisure, just kind of where we're at. Just really excited for a lot of the projects we have going forward. I did want to mention something I think I forgot to mention. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Chugach Foothill Phase 2 project a couple weeks ago. And that's over that way on Tudor at the Tudor curve, and it connects with the Phase 1 project. So that was well attended. There was a lot of cheer, the happiness abound from people for that project. So, I do want to pass along how grateful the community was that AMATS supported that project. Especially Joni and Steve Cleary when they started the TAP and got all those projects in the TIP, an acronym soup. And so I think it really just goes to show that those kind of projects really motivate the community, and it's really exciting. If no one's been there, please take some time to go because it is a beautiful project. You go over the little hill from the school and stuff, and you see the bridge, and then you see the mountains in the background, and it's pretty nice. So, but before you is just a report on where we're at with all of our projects. If you have any questions, please ask myself and or James Starzik. He puts this all together. Not helps, he puts it all together. And we are continuing to work, he's continuing to work on updating how it looks and stuff. So as time goes on, you'll see a refinement and cleanup of it and stuff. It's just, we want to get the information to the committees and the public ASAP.
Yes, it is really nice to see all the project updates. That is definitely very helpful. Once it's in place. So thank you for that effort for doing that, for taking the initiative.
Thank you,
That was James, right?
Yep.
That's good thinking. Kudos on that. Any questions or comments from the community? Okay. Sounds
Oh,
good.
I have, project related updates. So I'll give it because it's cool. O'Malley Road reconstruction phase 2 is underway. I had a member of the community reach out to me and want to know why the pathway at a certain point in the project was not going to be asphalt paved. So reached out, worked with the project team, and got them to go ahead and pave that portion of the pathway. So now the whole portion is paved. So that should be very helpful, and it was not contributing to the cost increase. The cost increase already happened. The paving of that pathway was not any more expensive than what was previously planned. So it's very exciting to have members of the community engaged and watching these things and reaching out and trying to work with us, and then DOT being able to work with us to make those adjustments to projects. So really appreciate their effort on that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. And on these project plan updates, do we need to provide opportunity for the community and public to comment?
We often do on the agenda items for the project and plan updates. We give the public an opportunity just because some of it's pretty interesting and they may want to give feedback. So
Sounds good. Are there any comments from the public on either item 6A or 6B? Go ahead, James.
Hey, James Starzik, DOT Planning. I appreciate all of the accolades. I've really thought this was important information to get out to you guys. But as Aaron said, it is pretty new. And so if there is information that you'd like to see added to this, please, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to integrate any ideas, any thoughts, as this, develops.
Okay, thank you, James. Any other questions or any other comments from the public? Online, anyone else in the room? Okay. Then we'll move on to item 7, general information. Anything to share, Karen, on that?
Yes, actually, since somebody won't share it, I'll go ahead and share it. Amazing amount of work has been done by Chelsea on the 2050 MTP. And it was just released for a 60-day public comment period. Yes, please give a round of applause to Chelsea and the rest of the project team, yes. I really would love if everyone listening and or in the room would go take a look at that. You know, we have tried to make significant strides forward in how that is displayed, to try and give a better idea to the public on how the process works, be a lot more open and clear, you know, limit the word salad as much as possible, but it's still pretty difficult. We have a really awesome interactive map of all the projects that our hope is if that is well received, that's what we start doing for as much as we can for AMATS, especially with TIP. So that comment period runs until October 9th. We will also be bringing that to the assembly and various committees and reaching out to, you know, Native Village of Clutna and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of work to do in the next 60 days, but we're very excited and would love for all of you to go take a look and provide any comments.
And as was mentioned at the last technical advisory committee meeting, after the public comment period, we'll bring the document and the public comments to you all for a work session with the policy committee. So don't feel like we're not bringing it to you. We're just waiting so you don't have to see it tons of times. Feel free to look at it and comment during the comment period as well.
Do you guys have a presentation that's kind of, that you're already gonna deliver to others that my group wants a presentation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I gave it to the freight advisory committee yesterday.
Yeah, and I think there'll be video.
Yeah. Hoping to
Posted
get some
about?
videos up as well, so that if you just want to watch it on the project website, kind of like the, you know, virtual meeting. One of our workshops will be virtual as well.
Yeah, there will be some workshops for the public.
Many options to get the information out. So whatever.
Yeah, I'm excited to see progress on that. So thank you, Chelsea. Thanks, Aaron. Any other general comments, information items?
The weather's kind of weird. I hope it turns into sun the next few days. It's been a little dreary.
Yeah. Yeah, at least it was. At least July. Very important. I didn't have last year's July.
Mhm.
Just say that.
I have to liven it up a little. It's been a very stressful week, so.
Okay, so moving on now to item 8, committee comments. Go ahead, Belinda.
Just for Steve, I just talked to purchasing, and in the future, they may be doing a tweak on how we're calling out those AMs as a sole source to DOT. They might change, just be aware of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did about 30 drafts. We call
Okay.
it
So
a
you're fully aware.
memorandum of agreement,
Yeah.
a contract, a sole source.
So
and
whether.
It went
it's-
up and down the ladder
Okay,
5, 6
so
times.
you're fully in.
Yeah, okay.
I was informed today.
Just let me know whenever we're gonna
Yeah,
call
they
it.
said they're gonna
Yeah,
get mine to go through. I've got one that I'm working on for Third Avenue, downtown signal and lighting, so that the assembly scheduled for August 22nd.
Okay, other committee comments? Okay, go ahead, Bart.
People Mover is celebrating our 49th year in the 49th state this year. So we have a wrapped bus, and I encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or look at our website, because we're posting photos from the previous decades. Like, for instance, did you know that we had a partnership with London in the 1980s where they sent us a double-decker bus and we rode it around like downtown as a circulator. So we have pictures like that. So, yeah, if you were following us on social media, you would know that. But we have a lot of cool promo items as well. So I did bring some socks for anybody that wants one. Our marketing team has combined all the 3 previous logos into one logo for this year in the color scheme from the 1970s. So if you want a pair of socks, happy to give those out. But
And those are quality socks.
quality socks. Yeah. We've got a whole bag.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Other committee comments? Okay, one that I'll add is that if you're not aware, the Assembly did pass a bike equity ordinance that does some rule changes to our Title IX, which is the traffic code for Anchorage, that cyclists now will be able to proceed through a stop sign as a yield sign, yielding to any traffic that may be present, but not needing to stop. And also being able to use a stoplight. If they are stopped at a stoplight and there is no traffic, cyclists are able to proceed through stoplight. Called it dead red, you might hear that comment, that term. And part of the reasoning behind that is we don't yet have comprehensive bike detection throughout Anchorage, and so that addresses that for the time being. There are a few other items in there. If you have questions, come look at that ordinance. And my understanding is that it takes effect 60 days after it was passed, which would be October 8th. So if there are questions or comments. And kind of with regard to that, there have been those in the public that have reached out asking about why bikes are allowed even in the road. And so just so that everyone knows, the laws allow a bike to be in the road. And so it's just something to be aware. There's definitely a need for awareness of the rules related to cycling and biking. And what are now, the other thing I guess I should add is the term vulnerable users, vulnerable road users is also highlighted in that ordinance. And there's some additional definitions of bike lane, protected bike lanes, cycle tracks, and vulnerable road users. So those are some things that are coming along. If anyone reaches out and asks questions, you're welcome to forward them to my department. We'll be happy to answer any questions and help just increase the awareness and education, because that's really a key thing for safety, is just being aware and mindful and courteous to everyone else on the road. So. Any other committee comments? Seeing none, are there any comments from the public? Okay, it looks like we have a hand up by Kyle. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Kyle. We'll be happy to hear from you on any comments.
Sure thing. Thank you. I just wanted to say that this has been one of the most educational meetings that I've seen for AMATS, especially regarding the explanation of the TIP and the STIP and all of the word salad soup that goes into all of that. So, and I really wanted to commend everyone on the committee for all of their hard work, and especially when trying to deal with the STIP. Just wanted to let everyone know that your work is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate the comment and engaging and coming. Are there any other comments from the public?
So I have one thing I forgot to do during my time, and I have swag to give out as well. I don't want to overshadow Bart, so I'm sorry. AMATS developed these nifty high visibility hats. They're knitted hats, so probably more appropriate for this winter time, but it's coming up here soon, so you might as well get them on. So, anything but honest. So I figured I was gonna pass it out to everybody, and you don't have to take them if you want. These are the first generation hats. We've already gotten the second gen, so these are like old school. You can't find them anywhere else. So, I will also provide them to the policy committee, and we've definitely gotten a lot of kudos for them because of how bright they are. And people have really enjoyed being able to use them as they're out and about on the trails and stuff. So you'll probably see more of these as we go. And it's part of our safety campaign that AMATS has been working with traffic on. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other public comments? Yes, I don't see any more there. So with that, we'll move on to item 10 and adjourn at 3:51.